Welcome everyone to our latest Clubmate live webinar. Very happy to say today we've got a special guest, Paul Coulson, Chief Executive of Institute of Fisheries Management, who's come to us today to do a presentation on maximising your fishery, fisheries management and habitat creation, which I think we're all interested in, and I think it really covers a wide ranging range of topics. So thank you very much for coming, Paul. It's nice to see you.
No worries.
And I'll hand over to you. You'll just have to give me a little nod when you want the slides changing.
Yeah, even though, apologies for the slight delay. That is completely and utterly Rob's fault. No, so it's completely and utterly my fault. I should have pulled my finger out and sent that to Rob much earlier than now. I just assumed technology would work, but alas not. So yeah, evening all. My name is Paul Coulson. I'm the Chief Exec, as Rob said, of the Institute of Fisheries Management. For those of you who don't know the Institute, we are a professional membership body for anybody and anyone engaged in fisheries management itself, whether people who tend to get wet, whether the ones who put the waders on and go out there and look at the fish rather than the academic researchers in the field. So yeah, we have members all over the place, all over the UK and all over the world. But what we're very well known for is both our training, which we've been running training courses since the 1970s, but also the conferences, knowledge sharing, and events that we run. And obviously, we'll also, as part of that, and our service to members in the Institute, we'll come and do talks and things like this, which is we're very happy to do. So yeah, it's lovely to see you all. Right, Rob, move us on.
No, sorry. Oh, we're going too far. There we go.
So this is, as Rob said, this is a bit of a sort of a wide-ranging talk. I'm trying to put lots of different bits and pieces into it, try and make it as interesting and as interactive as we can. So to kick off a little bit about management, then we're actually going to put a little bit about rivers in, just as an aside, just to show the slight difference between how we manage rivers compared to still waters. Look at resilience, particularly with climate change and what's coming down the line. Then we're going to start to look at the sort of that habitat and that fish productivity, how we can protect our fish, make our fisheries as productive as possible, sort of grow our own, and protect our fish from predation, and then some other bits and pieces that they've sort of put in at the end as well. So let's move us forward, Rob. So the basis of this, and the basis of looking at this whole range of factors around management planning and how we can manage and design a plan to improve our fishery moving forward. And a lot of fisheries that we speak to, and we do a lot of workshops and things. We work with the Environment Agency. We do regular workshops across the winter. We all turn up at committee meetings and forums and other bits and pieces as well. So we do quite a bit of this. And you see a lot of fisheries who don't really have a plan. You know, they're sort of moving from one situation to another. They're going to committee meetings and they're all voting by committee, and the loudest voices are winning, and they're jumping around all over the place without actually having any idea of A, what their fishery type is, you know, what they want that fishery to be, and B, how they're planning on getting there, and that stepwise process to get to that end goal. And I think the thing with this is, when you're looking at management plans, is you need to identify what those goals and objectives for your fishery are. What do you want them to be, and how are you going to achieve them? And it's not a simple process. You often want to come back and reflect on, as you're moving through those stages, as to what you've done. Has it worked? If it hasn't worked, how do we change it? And we can move on till we get to that end stage. But what is important here is that you've got that end goal. You understand where you want to be, and you're bringing in this case, your stakeholders, your members, your club members, your day ticket members, whoever they might be, with you on it. And it's an open process. What I will say is, if you're dealing with angling clubs and you've got committees, you've got to have the committee with you on it. Yeah, if you're the guy, the person who's got that idea, that the way you want to go, you've got to bring everybody with you. And part of that is that sort of monitoring, and it's that discussion, and it's that sharing your stages as you go through. So move it forward, Rob.
Just as a quick one before we move the slide forward, if if you've got any questions for Paul during this, then feel free to put them in the chat, which you can access the chat with the speech bubble at the bottom right of your screen, or use the raise hand feature. You'll see a hand across the middle bottom of your screen. Feel free to raise your hand and we can address it. Don't want you to go through a presentation with a lot of info on it and then feel like you've forgotten your question at the end. So feel free to raise away, or drop a question in the chat and we'll answer them at the end.
Yeah.
I think Paul's got a great point when it comes to kind of angling clubs and coming from that world, and obviously that's the core audience at Clubmate here. It's really difficult with committees, as we all know. They're very changeable. They can change every year. And one of the biggest challenges, and I'm sure Paul's faced this before, is you turn up 2 years in a row and the committee's full of different people. So as you get voted, as you all get voted by your membership on a yearly basis, management plans tend to be limited to 1 year, because everyone's thinking, what can we do this year between AGMs? Whereas I think Paul will attest, a lot of fishery management can scale well beyond 1 year's worth of work. So moving forwards.
So yeah, so just a little bit around how do we what information can we gather to help us build that plan? And it's all of this is easily accessible nowadays with modern mapping programs and Magic Map and GIS and all the rest of it. But often when you speak to fisheries, they don't have a full understanding of what waters they've got and how big those waters are. You know, what's your surface area, how deep they are, you know, what your vegetation coverage is, what type of vegetation have you got, what's your macrophyte, your aquatic plant diversity, how much of your pond and waters does it cover? You know, is it an invasive plant? Is it something you can manage? Same with water quality. And again, when we turn up at fisheries or workshops and we speak to a room of fishery managers or fishery owners and we say to them, what was your dissolved oxygen this morning, or have you been tracking your dissolved oxygen this week? And a good number of them look at you a bit blankly because they're not fully understanding of what they're actually faced with. So having that idea of those water quality parameters as well. Yeah, and then things like stock biomass and composition as well. You know, how many of you know how many fish are in your waters? Yeah, how many pounds an acre have you got? How many species have you got in there? Yeah, what different species are there in there? Are they all being fully utilised by your members and by your anglers? And then other things such as access points and restrictions on the site and things like that. Just move it forward, Rob. And then there's lots of ways of us gathering this data now, isn't there? In the olden days, it'd have been one of your members who was into specimen fishing or had a marker float and would go out and would walk around the lake with a marker rod and crash it to a foam and write it all down, and they'd end up with a nice little map that had loads of numbers written all over it. But nowadays with modern technology, things have moved on. You'll see there's an image there in the middle from a deeper probe that actually tells you where the fish are. It tells you the overall depth. It tells you the numbers of fish. It'll tell you there's a size of fish in there as well. And then the two diagrams at the bottom maybe is something you might not have come across. These are new surveys. It's a process called BioBase. And this uses off-the-shelf sort of fish finder technology. And then it uses the data it gathers to actually come up with a heat map for a lake. And this heat map can then tell you different things. It can tell you depth, like the one on the left where you've got red going into blue. So that's two different lakes. And it's sort of going through the depth profile. The darker the blue, the deeper the lake. And the one on the right is actually showing you macrophyte coverage. And it's telling you percentages of plants that you've got within that lake as you run through with your fish finder, your sort of sonar sort of technology. And this can be done in a morning. It is literally that simple nowadays. The Environment Agency have been doing these. These are two Environment Agency surveys you can see on here. You get your kit, you run a transect across your lake, you throw it up into the cloud. Some magic happens digitally in the cloud, and the next day you get a map that looks like that. And talking to the guys at BioBase, they've actually got a new, they call these different layers. They've got a new layer on there as well, which will now tell you the fish densities and the fish numbers as well. So not only can they tell you depth, macrophyte coverage, they can tell you bed hardness as well. So they can actually pick out sediment types and bed type in there as well. But it'll also tell you what fish you've got in there. And then the bit in the middle is just looking at eDNA surveys, so you can even now identify what fish you've got in your lake without seeing them. So you can take a sample of water, you can run it through some filters, you give it to to a company, they run it through a processor, and they actually can tell you from the DNA that's in the water what fish you've got in your lake, without you actually having to physically go in and grab them and touch them. Yes, it's doing people like me out of a job, because you don't need to say nets and electric fishing gear anymore. You can send a student with a bottle. He'll take a sample, run it through a processor, and actually tell you what's in there, with a high degree of accuracy as well.
Saw this at a few months ago. Actually, it's a to think you can take a water sample and find out kind of the stocking of your lake is unbelievable.
Yeah, the one thing it won't do is it's not brilliant at the minute at telling you biomass. So it'll tell you presence and absence. So it'll tell you there are roach, bream, carp, tench, crucians in there. It won't tell you how many of each. So you do still need, to have that idea of if you want to get an overall biomass assessment, you still need a seine net or, some other fish survey technique. But brilliant for actually telling you what is present, and the accuracy is pretty good. To move us forward, Rob. So you may have come across this before. This is some work that Ian Coutts did as professor at Hull University a number of years ago, and he's actually just updated this this year and put some colour on it. The first iteration was just a black and white diagram. But if you actually look at this, what this is looking at is the factors at play that both increase and decrease the diversity in the numbers of fish within your lakes. And if you look at the dotted line, those factors above the dotted line are those that we, as fishery managers, can actually influence. We can look at things like natural recruitment. We can improve the habitat to encourage that. We've obviously got stock and introduction. So you've got planned stockings, which is the ones you actually put in. Unfortunately, we often have unplanned stockings where people set fish free, shall we say, within our lakes that we hadn't actually wanted to be set free in our lakes. And we also have sort of accidental stockings as well, don't we? You can have rivers overtopping and fish getting moved around the place, and often they can have issues with them as well. And then for those of you who manage fisheries, you can have immigration of fish from other areas, can't you? You've got that in-river migration between species. If you look at the factors below the line, those are ones that are detrimental to that fish or to that fishery, to that diversity of those fish. And you'll notice on there's quite a lot of those things that I'm sure some of you have come across, particularly with things like climate change and warm temperatures and disease. You've got things like KHV in there. You've got parasites as well. You've got pollution from a whole host of different factors, natural mortality, and then obviously you've got predation in there as well, and there's a whole plethora of predators, fairy and feathery, that can have an impact on our fish, as well as obviously piscivorous fish as well, which you often we overlook because of the problems faced by piscivorous birds and mammals. Just move us forward, Rob. So with taking all that on board, we can have a look at habitat improvement. If you want to just flick it on, Rob, and we'll some of these on there. Thank you. So taking a lot on board around planning and the issues we can face and how we want to sort of try and mitigate some of those impacts on our fishery, we can look at how we can improve the habitat of our fisheries. And as Rob sort of alluded to, and you guys who are managing sort of club lakes, or you've got committees, none of these things are very quick fixes. Even putting plants in, you go and put loads of marginal vegetation and it doesn't grow that year. You're not going to see an immediate impact. It's going to be 2 or 3 years before you start to see them growing and doing the job that you want. So if that committee changes, that committee moves, it often it goes beyond the sort of the standard life of a committee, if you like. But again, nowadays we're faced with fisheries that have been over-engineered. We've modified them. We've degraded them to such an extent, for other purposes. Some of you guys might be managing fisheries that were old gravel pits. They've been engineered. They're all industrial sites. They're park lakes. They're not designed initially as fisheries, and we're trying to bring them around to be something that they weren't initially. So just move it forward, Rob. And so this is just a schematic we designed for speaking at events such like this. What we're trying to promote here is this good fisheries welfare, and you've got a number of factors around that topic that are all at play, and they're all interlinked with each other. And these are the type of things we're trying to manage or improve or mitigate to increase and improve the fisheries welfare, or the welfare of our stock. And you can affect some of this. You can look at things like stock health. Well, stock health is directly related to just the number of fish you've got. It might be related to supplementary feeding, and a number of you might be adding supplementary feed at particular times of year. But is that supplementary feed of good nutrition? Does it give you all of the nutrients that those fish need? So it comes back to that fact. That's a health factor in there. And even within stock health as well, we're looking at things like water quality. Exploitation rates, how many anglers do you have? How often do you fish get caught? What sort of densities have you got in your lakes? What sorts of species have you got? And how suitable are they for that fishery type that you've got? So there's lots of factors that are all interlinked that come back to this idea of fish welfare, and habitat is obviously going to be a key component of that. Move us forward, Rob. So I thought I'd just sort of show you the slight difference between some of the work we do in rivers, and I'm the chairman of a Rivers Trust, in the East Yorkshire Rivers Trust, and then some of the difference between what we see in rivers and what we often see in still waters. So this is this is the wild trout trust, I'm sure some of you are aware of, and this is them chucking, for want of a better phrase, trees into rivers. They're physically adding as much habitat and as large woody debris, as we call it, into that river as possible. Because what they want is, they want that diversity. They want that diversity of flows. They want different flow patterns. They want slack areas. They want faster areas. They want clear gravel. They want a bit of sediment. They want leaf litter going into there as well. And that creates that diversity of habitat that is beneficial to aquatic invertebrates and the fish that are in there. And again, predominantly for a lot of this, it's salmonids. It might be brown trout. It might be Atlantic salmon in there as well. But we've come to an understanding with river and habitat improvement that it is the rough stuff. Rivers do not like to be clean. They have trees fall into them. The flow can move. The flow will cut over trees, round trees, through trees. It'll move trees. If you look at what some of the work we're doing now, putting beavers back into the environment is just this. We're bringing back beavers to replicate what we're doing here. And beavers do it with a lot less stress and a lot less machinery than we use. So it's just to show you, if you just move it forward, Rob, things like this, keeping rivers cool, using shade to mitigate temperature. And we're all well aware after the summer we've had this year and the past couple of years how warm waters can get. And if any of you go out and check the water temperatures in some of your lakes, you'll see it regularly north of sort of 18, 19, 20 degrees. And we've even seen that in rivers. Some of the water temperatures this year were north of 20 degrees. If you're a cold loving fish like a salmonid and you'll get put into water that's 21, 22 degrees, you don't do particularly well. So looking at how we can use riparian vegetation to shade streams is really important. And this is where I think rivers and river keepers and these sort of conservation agencies are really ahead of the game and stuff like that. So very, very good at using the environment to their benefit. Look forward, Rob. And again, lots of functions for different vegetation components. Where you can plant them, you can put, does help with erosion. They provide shade. They provide leaf litter. That leaf litter is organic matter. It's used by biological agents. It's used by invertebrates. It's eaten by other animals, and up through the food chain as well. Look forward, Rob. And then we've got these guides now on riparian woodland creation. How can we improve our habitat by planting trees? And I'm sure some of you have got river stretches as well on your books. It's not just all still waters, and these sorts of guides are brilliant for taking to committee meetings and things. I deal with some anglers on some of our club waters up here on the fisheries, and they're complaining that they can't cast a fly or they can't put a feeder in because it's overgrown with vegetation and willows and things, and they'd rather have it as a denuded channel so they can physically get in, they can fish it safely. But that doesn't help the fish, particularly where you've got a situation like we have, where we've got large numbers of cormorants and other predators, and you suddenly take all the cover away and you turn it into an open sort of all-you-can-eat buffet for the predators. So we need to have some of that diversity in there. And again, Rob, and likewise, I won't bore you with it, but there's loads of research that shows that the benefit of having diversity and different debris and woody debris and woody material, biological material, and organic material going into streams. And the same applies, in lakes. I appreciate lakes are slightly different. You're dealing with a different dynamic. You've got different angler types and requirements. But this idea that habitat is to be frowned upon and removed so that we just make it easy for the anglers isn't something we really want to be promoting. And you need to have that structure, particularly with the change in the climate that we've got and the change in weather patterns that we've got as well. Just move it forward, Rob. And then I thought I would show you this as well with regards to climate change. This is some work done by a former colleague of ours, Phil Hickley, and this is looking at what we call range shift linked to climate change and how the animals that we the animals that we sort of know and love are going to shift as temperature changes. And you'll notice on there, there's fish, and that sort of mean shift for fish is something like 50 kilometers or 30 kilometers north over the next sort of 50 years or so. And that's quite important, because it shows that the cold water species, we live in a temperate climate, those fish are going to move further north as well. And if you just move it on, Rob, I can sort of show you that as well. This is some further work done by the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and that's looking again at fish. And there's 3 groups of fish in there. So the 3 different colours linked from green, which are the ones that we know a little bit about. Sorry, the green is the ones we know a lot about. Orange, not so much, and blue are those that aren't as recorded. So you can see fish are going to move further north, but so are aquatic bugs. And aquatic bugs and fish are obviously interlinked. They're feeding on each other. And so as the bugs move further north and the aquatic food moves further north, the fish are going to follow it, but they're going to be a point where the 2 become uncoupled. And that's really quite important. These cold water species are going to shift further north, but our warmer loving species, things like carp, for instance, are going to do particularly well. But those of you who are interested in fishing for things like pike and trout and other cold loving species, they're going to start to shift further and further north, and they're going to become very, very difficult to survive in the southern half of the United Kingdom. And if you move it on, Rob, you can sort of see that the hottest year on record was 2023, and if you hit it again, and again, 2025, the hottest summer mean temperature ever recorded. This isn't going to go backwards, it's only going to go one way. And what we need to do is make our fisheries as resilient as possible so that we can manage that. If move it forward, Rob. And just to show you that, for those of you who go game fishing, that's Atlantic salmon rod catches in England and Wales. And the last year reported was to 2023. And if you look at 2023, just click the mouse, Rob. It was the lowest recorded rod catch of Atlantic salmon ever. Why is that important? If you just move it forward, Atlantic salmon are now classed as critically endangered. In the UK, the British stock or the UK stock is critically endangered. And one of the key drivers for that is temperature and climate change. So what we're trying to say here is it's that point of making your fisheries as resilient as possible. It really is important that you're gearing your fisheries up to be ready for what's coming down the line with climate change. And these summers of 2023, 2025 are not anomalies anymore. They're becoming the norm. So gearing up waters to be ready for that is really important. So just move it forward, Rob. So just to set the scene, really, fish populations are dynamic. They work within the environment that they're in, but in a lot of cases, there are limiting factors to why fish populations don't just carry on exponentially growing. One of those is obviously habitat constraints. They can only grow and proliferate within the constraints of that environment that they're in. Another one is obviously predation. If they all get eaten, it's quite difficult to breed if you can't find some other fish to breed with. There's also a competition element in there. And when you get high densities of fish, you often get disease, and those diseases sort of control that population. Sometimes things like koi herpes virus and other diseases will have a definite will make a definite dent in the populations. We also have variable weather conditions, and that again is a factor at play. We get warmer summers, but we get wetter winters. You get wetter winters, you get wet autumn. You get a wet autumn, and fish in rivers particularly can get displaced because they're not big enough to counter the flood flows that we get. And some of this, of course, is then climate driven. So we need to be aware of that. And again, so if you look at, let's go back one row. If you look forward, sorry. So we can get what we fishery scientists call year class strength. So you get these really good years. So this year might be a really good year for coarse fish. Coarse fish like it warm. Coarse fish fry like hot water. They like the fish will breed well. The flows have been sort of steady. It's been really warm. We might find that we get a really good year class of cyprinids, of coarse fish this year. Not so good for your salmonids, particularly with low river flows, but with coarse fish in lakes, this will be a good year if we don't get a really wet autumn. Really cold, wet autumn, particularly for river fish, and they all get washed out to sea. But there's potential for it to be a good year. If you get a good year class in this year, next year you'll start to see it through the population. In 4 or 5 years' time, you get really good, strong, bigger fish, and those fish often sustain that population for a number of years. And people will often refer to perch, for instance, seems to be doing particularly well at the moment. We've got a glut of these big perch, and they all go back to a year class a few years back. Let's move it forward. And then also, obviously, all these factors are at play. What creates that year class strength in coarse fish? Flow, temperature, habitat, and everything being able to be interlinked. But a lot of it is to do with availability of food, the right habitat, and having the right conditions for them at the right times of year. Move it forward, Rob. And just to show you how complex that model is, this is some work from Rob Britton back in the late 2000s, and it just to show you that complexity of factors. This is cyprinid fish. This is our roach, bream, and everything else, and those sort of factors that are playing. Those that are in red are the ones that we don't fully understand yet. We're still working on that recruitment idea, the fecundity. How many eggs does each of those fish produce, and what's the viability of them? What factors are at play? How old are they when they mature and they breed? What food do they want at different life stages? There's lots of factors at play. It's not quite as straightforward as you would think. Let's move it forward, Rob. So the importance then of habitats. Move it back to our fisheries. So we need to provide and produce a habitat and an environment that suits fish at all life stages. So we need somewhere for fish to spawn. And in this example here, you can obviously see a carp spawning on some aquatic vegetation. But when those fish have hatched, they've come out of the eggs and they're alevins, and they've still got their yolk sac attached, and they're looking for somewhere to hide. We need to have that habitat. Then from there, we need to have habitat for juvenile fish as well. And then we need to be able to give them something to feed on. So we need to have that juvenile food that is suitable for them. And in many instances, that's zooplankton, and having the right size of zooplankton in the right areas at the right stages. And so we can manipulate that. We can put areas of habitat in place which is suitable for carp and suitable for fish to spawn on, and suitable for habitat as well. And often these are shallow areas, heavily vegetated. We try and minimize the interference. We make no fishing zones, and those areas will produce juvenile fish for us. Move it forward, Rob. And there's just some examples in there. So you've got a diversity of aquatic plants in there. So you top left, top right, just still water habitat, marginal habitat. And if you look at that picture in the top left, you'd easily pick out 9 or 10 different plants. There's a stream in the middle there. We water crowfoot and other aquatic plants, and again, lots of cover providing for them. You've got Potamogeton, so you've got good fish depth, good densities of plants, shallow water. It warms up. But just to give you an idea, some of these fish, when they hatch and they've used up the yolk sac, they're as big as an eyelash. That's the size of fish we're trying to deal with here. They're not, when you might first see them or start to see them moving in the margins, when they're a couple of inches. These things are as thin as an eyelash, and they're looking for somewhere to keep out the way of predators, but also to find somewhere to grow and to develop, and to find enough food and a warm enough temperature for them to actually grow in. Let's move it forward, Rob. So, why do we need to create or manipulate habitat? I like that picture on the right. That's a classic park lake. That's the classic park lake that is just around the corner from where I live. That's the lake I grew up fishing on. And you can see that fence there keeps the kangaroos in. on the right hand side. It's quite a disconcerting when you're fishing in there and you can hear the animals rutting and all sorts behind you. But that's what the council deem as sort of a suitable sort of banking. It's revetted all the way around. Doesn't actually scream fish. And it makes it's quite a sterile environment. But we can do stuff to sort of improve on some of that. There's lots of reasons, for poor habitat. It could be erosion. Some of these particularly park lakes, there's stuff with dogs going into them, stuff with pedal boats and all sorts on there as well. But what we're trying to think about as well is it's not just the fish, but it's the overall ecology of these lakes that we want to try and improve. Move it forward, Rob. Yeah, and often, some fisheries would like to look like this. And that's not what we want. We want to create a habitat suitable for fish, and so that they're not just swimming around in a bowl of water where they're at the mercy of anglers and everything else 24/7. Let's move forward. Yeah, so you've got water bodies like that. Not ideal as a fishery. If you move it forward again, then often that is habitat. Yeah, an upturned shopping trolley in the margins of a lake. Perfectly good habitat. I've actually seen some footage of some guys where they've put a GoPro down in an urban drain with some trolleys and traffic cones on, and they're full of fish because it's the only habitat they've got. If you think about putting floating islands in and anti-predation cages and things, it's basically a glorified set of shopping trolleys. Let's move it forward.
I've seen that one before, Paul, because I've spent so long pulling trolleys out the river and then people saying you should shove them into full of fish.
Yeah, so there's us doing a fish survey. That's on a stream just outside of Loughborough. That's us doing an electric fishing survey. And there's the shopping trolley. Yeah, they must be quite rich because that one has a £1 coin to set it free. So there must be quite a well-to-do area if they can afford to run off with a shopping trolley. But we find fish in and around them. It does make habitat. Yeah. So it's structure, I think, rather than shopping trolleys. And just as an example, these are all fisheries. The one in the top right isn't a stock pond, that's a 25 peg max lake. The one in the top left, likewise, and the one in the bottom left is a fishery. It was that newly dug, it didn't have footpaths, so they just put road planings down for you to go and walk to put your box on. And the one on the right, you can see how the islands are eroding away. When I went to visit that fishery, the fishery owner manager was more impressed by his pegs that he'd paid top dollar for and imported from Europe, and they were made of this high density plastic and they're going to last forever and blah blah blah. And when I pointed out to him that his island was eroding, he was like, "Yeah, I really must deal with that." I was like, "You did realise you've built this on the east coast and the prevailing wind comes whistling off the North Sea and is always going to erode your islands away if you build it that way." Anyway, I didn't really think about that, did I? But my pegs are great, aren't they? I was like, "Yeah, but you're going to want to fix that." And the next time I went to see him, he just braid in fence posts and put sheet pile around it. But then, the reverse of that is not all habitat is good habitat. We've got a situation like in the middle there where you've got upturned bent out cars. The island on the top left is another one where it had been eroded away. Some larger trees had managed to get a foothold in there and start to break the island down. And again, it had been corrected by some geotextile and a lot of 3-inch poles braiding. The tall picture on the right hand side, that lake was overrun with these tall coniferous trees on the island, and they'd got old, they'd been undercut by erosion, and then one day in a storm during a match it actually fell over and it went over. Luckily there was nobody on the other side. That was an island, there was fishing on both sides, and it went careering over and crashed to the bank on the opposite side. So you can see that not all habitat is good habitat. The promotion of habitat is important, but we need to think about what the issues are going to be further down the line. So there's lots of things we can do. We could put for physical habitat improvements. There's a whole raft of stuff you can put in. So if you just move it forward, Rob, and we'll go through some examples. Shelter is important. And that's a still from a lake not far from me, and you can sort of see all the carp sort of sat. This was in the winter. They're all these are big fish. These are all £20+ plus fish, and they're all huddle together for safety underneath the root system of this tree. And then you can sort of see when the same lake, the divers went out into the lake, and you could see a clear feeding patch where those fish had been rubbing and flanking and feeding, and had actually rubbed away the bottom vegetation to get to the food. So the importance is there. It doesn't have to be technical. This is what they do a lot of in particularly in the States, and we do a bit of it on rivers as well. It's sort of what we call this log and Christmas tree arrangement. Particularly if you do this in January, you'll be overrun with the things. Spray them into concrete blocks, pin them in, chuck them into your lakes, and you've got immediate habitat. We use them for revetments as well on rivers. They make great marginal habitat. They're very dense. They're good for wave erosion as well. Move it forward, Rob. Yeah, just flick it through. Again, this is just to show them there. This is it. This picture on the left is in the States. That picture on the right is in Europe. This is a gravel pit. You can see the excavators still working on another site, and they're desperately trying to put some habitat into the lake. And they've got a whole host of woody material. And then just to show some, some of the research that's been done. Supplemented deadwood brush piles, they could show value and the increase in habitat and increase in fish numbers. And we can do that, we can do that by ourselves by chucking in material, woody material, or we can buy them, so we can buy them as like this. This is a floating island. You can buy these off the shelf. If you move it forward, Rob. This is one from AGA, so from Ash Gerdler's company. They make these ready to go. They've got predation shelters underneath. They're made with weld mesh. They've got a geotextile layer, then like a coir matting on there, which the plants grow in. And they provide lots of benefits, not only to the fish from an anti-predation point of view, but from a water quality point of view. They're taking nutrients. They've got an aesthetic value. The native plants can grow on top of them as well. They're good fry habitat. Fry will live in and amongst the root systems as well. And they're neutralizing those nutrients. They're helping you to mop up nitrates and phosphates, which in turn will help with your algae control and your green water as well. But you don't have to buy them. You can knock them up yourself. There's lots of tutorials and things online about how to do them. They can be like the one on the left, which is really mature, or you can make them much smaller, like the one on the right. They make them out of some materials you can buy from sort of B&Q and DIY shops, some waste pipe and some insulating foam, expanding foam and Coca-Cola bottles, coir matting and some local plants. And away you go. That's one of the best ones I've ever seen. Hats off to Ramsbottom Angling Club in the Northwest. They will take the glory for that, but they will tell you, those guys, that it took them about 3 or 4 goes to get it to that stage. They learned the hard way that you need to put some mesh on top of it as well to protect it from the geese, because the geese will just get on and will just murder it if you're not careful, and they'll just turn them into muddy, floating roosting points. If you move it forward, Rob, and then to reiterate that, so I've taken a couple of slides from Rich and Jake at the Angling Trust from a presentation they do for us at some of our workshops, just to sort of really highlight that the importance of habitat in sort of helping to deter some of the predators we might get. The fishery on the left there is obviously a water supply reservoir. It's very difficult to manage that. But the one on the right isn't. That's a proper fishery, and it's a proper fishery where they've gone to town with the chainsaws because anglers were moaning that they were getting the tackle caught in the trees. And the next thing you know is the cormorants and the predators are in because there's nothing to deter them and there's nowhere for the fish to hide. Just move it forward, Rob. And there's lots of things we can do. We can, there are lots of natural habitat improvements. We can plant them up. We can put sanctuary areas in, lily beds. We can put submerged aquatic plants in. So just a word of caution, around adding additional plants to waters. Make sure they can be managed. Make sure you're putting native species in and the native to that locale where you are. Don't go buying nice ornamental lilies from the garden centre and shoving it in, because you think they look pretty. That's not going to work. You're going to then be coming back to us and going, how do I deal with all these lilies? And again, you can do it yourself. There's pictures from Andy Ellis there in the bottom left, sort of showing you how was, a lot of flag iris and things going in to secure the margins. You can buy coir bundles, so these are coir sausages. You can then have them planted up with your native mix for your area, pin them into your margins between your pegs, and you've got immediate sort of structure. You've got immediate cover, and you've got a bit of an aesthetic benefit as well, because you're starting to create that barrier between the two pegs, and it's adding additional value. I think we forget sometimes as anglers that we initially go out fishing because we want a little bit of peace and quiet, and we like to be on our own. Then we go to these waters that haven't got a reed stem, have we? And again, I think you can move it forward, Rob. That's again just to reiterate those sort of individual refuges that you can make. And then if you're interested, the Environment Agency's YouTube channel still got a brilliant video by Andy Eves, who was a fishery officer up in the northwest, about how to make them. They don't have to be overly technical. You can make them yourselves and put them in. One note of caution: if you are going to put them in, make sure you tell your anglers where they are. Otherwise, they'll be moaning at you that they've lost the leads and floats and everything within them, or they keep getting snagged, and it'll be your fault. So
I think there's a great video of James Hooker from the I think building some of these. Which are actually quite simple. It's essentially a load of pipes shoved through a ball to create loads of habitat for small fish to habitate.
Yeah, Sputnik bed deterrent.
Yeah, they're the most interesting ones. You can build some of them for fun.
Yeah, if you just pause it a second. Just a word on those. I have a colleague who put them into a very big lake, and what happened was the undercurrent just rolled them around. If you've got anywhere that's got a decent depth, shallow enough to create an undertow, make sure you'll see on that picture there's a lot of brick on them. Make sure you've got enough weight to hold them in place, or they'll all end up on one end. So just to show you what happens when you don't have habitat, if you just play this. This is my local canal. That's a goosander. And that's a friend of mine filming said goosander with a perch in its mouth. The perch was that big it couldn't take off, and it kept flapping down the canal to try and leave with the perch. But what you'll see on that is this is a canal, but it's actually a rare beast because it's a tidal canal, and it's controlled by the internal drainage board. And what they do is they use it for conveyance. They try and pump it. It's a pump system, and they wash the water out, or flush the water out as quick as they can. So what happens is we end up with zero in-stream cover, and what we've seen is that the goosanders and the cormorants are having an absolute field day. And if you just move it forward one, Rob, that's a still from a video taken off the footbridge to show you all of the fish that were amassed underneath the footbridge. The first bit of cover they could find, every fish for, I think it was something like 1,000 yards, had got underneath the bridge. And we know it was every fish because we put a fish finder through it, and there wasn't a fish to be found until he got near the bridge. So if you just run it forward, I'll show you a colleague of mine with a deeper fish finder, and if you actually look on his phone in a second, he put the fish finder under the bridge, chucked it under the bridge, and all the fish were tucked up nicely underneath the bridge in about 6 foot of water. And if you look down the canal, that's what we're faced with. Yeah, they've even cut back all the reed stems and the branches so that water can move quicker down the system. And so the only cover we've got is under the bridge. So just move it forward, and that unfortunately gets reflected in the catches. For those of you who are match anglers, this is a Winter League match from the 26th of February. That's actually 2023. D&W means did not weigh, so they all blanked. And peg 40 with £3.14 is the last peg next to the bridge, and he caught on a feeder rod by chucking his feeder 30-40 yards under the bridge to catch a fish. So there's a whole section there of never caught a fish. So and the 004 is 4 gram, not even an ounce. And the result of that is we don't fish winter leagues on there anymore. It stopped because the fishing became so difficult. And yes, I am one of those names on that list that didn't catch anything.
Where are you? I reckon you're this one. I reckon you're sat next to the winner, mate.
Yeah, well, no, I was down there in that middle, actually, freezing to death. Just very quickly, just to flag this as well about plants. People get scared of plants, and try and rip them out, and they're forever getting moaned at by anglers. We have 151 native plants, aquatic plant species in this country, plus 30 non-native invasives, or what we refer to as aliens, and those are the ones I'm sure you've come across. Things like Canadian pondweed, elodea, you'll have come across Lagerosyphon, Kelly waterweed, you'll have come across these ornamental lilies and things like that. But we have got a lot of native plants to go at. So there's about 180 in total. And it's using these aquatic plants to our benefit. And there's different plants in different stages and do different things. And I think it's getting away from being scared of plants, but using the right plants in the right environment. And if you move it forward, there's a whole host of them. We've been doing this for a long time. This is a book I actually found. It's an old library book, and it's wildlife after gravel. So it's putting lakes back after gravel pits have been dug, and it goes back to the 1990s. And again, it's showing you that the importance of putting plants in it, the right areas and the right plants for the right environment. And if you get it right, they will take. Just moving forward. And just to so there's been lots of research done. You get 5 times the biomass of invertebrates where you've got vegetation than on a bare substrate. Yes, all right, we maybe don't want our dragonfly larvae eating all of our fish fry, but fish fry feed on these invertebrates as well. Adult fish feed on these invertebrates as well. So it's important that we've got some degree of aquatic vegetation in there, and it's not just bare water. Moving forward. And then again, just to reiterate that, it's a very simple, primitive sort of food web. But what's important here is to understand that all of these levels are interlinked, and if you start to knock them out or mess about with them, you have a detrimental impact further up the chain. So you've got to have things. You've got to have your macrophytes. So your macrophytes feed your shrimps feed your fish feed your dragon, and so on as you go up through the chain. So it's really important that you've got that whole balance within the ecosystem, and you're not just looking at the fish. If you start to force it and you put too many fish in there, you'll very, very quickly remove or damage the lower levels, and that'll have a detrimental effect on the overall ecology of the water body. And just to show that, this is why it's important. Again, this is some earlier work done by Ian Coutts. Carrying capacity of lakes is a balance. You can't force lakes. You've got to have to have a ton. So 50 kilos of roach, you've got to have a ton of shrimp, snails, and other food. But to have a ton of shrimp, snails, and other food, you've got to have 10 tons of plants and algae to feed them. And if you force the fishery, you add another 50 kilos or 100 kilos of roach into the equation, they very, very quickly consume the food, which in turn can leave you with an imbalance. You get that top-down pressure, and then the fish then are struggling. There's nothing to support them, so then they become compromised as well. So having an understanding of what you can deal with is really important. And that then brings us around to finish on when you stock in a lake. People force it. They dig a lake, and I get it. People want to be fishing on it the next day. You cannot force fisheries. If you build a lake on a Monday and you put fishing on a Tuesday, by the Wednesday those fish are looking around for food, and they're going to really struggle unless that lake is mature enough and can support them. Or you're just going to raft it with anglers, and the fish then become completely reliant on anglers' food. And what happens when your anglers go off and do something else? Anglers are very fickle. They move, don't they? They'll go to the next water along. So rather than stocking fish, have a think about how you can grow your own fish. Buying fish is expensive. Look at the fish you've got. Look at how you can sustain them and provide them with that habitat to breed and to provide your own self-sustaining population. And it is happening now. 20 years ago, carp never made it through the winter. It's very, very rare you've got carp breeding successfully in the UK, and now it's quite a common occurrence. You'll get fisheries overrun with them. Carp, 100,000 eggs per kilo body weight. It doesn't take many carp to produce a monoculture of species, and they outcompete everything else. You only have to look at Australia and places to see the problems they cause. And then if you just roll it on, and then so that alternative is really improve the nutrition of your fish. Examine the bait that's going into your fisheries. Is the bait your angler's using sustainable for those fish? Is it suitable for those fish? Is a trout pellet the right food for a coarse fish? Is it giving the fish what they want? Is the nutritional value of it suitable? Are your anglers turning up with 10 tins of meat, and cat food and other crap and chucking it in? Is that a sustainable diet for your fish? Is it good for your water quality? be aware of what's going into your fish. Study the nutrition of your what fish need, and make sure your fishery supports that. And then, really, just the last slide. Too many fish is a problem. Anglers often don't understand this. You know, we aren't catching fish, we'll put more fish in. We aren't catching fish, we'll put more fish in. That is not the answer to your problems. When fisheries become overstocked, you start to get a lot of problems. You get water quality issues, you've got excess nutrients, which then leads to waters going green. The algae then dies off, then you get the oxygen crash, and you get the fish kill. You get fish becoming nutrient deficient and start to look like razor blades, like those things on the right hand side. You get an increase in pathogens and disease because the fish's immune system's compromised because they're not getting enough food. You get stunted fish, over competition. And then eventually your stocks, your catches drop off because the fish are just so compromised, so not in any status to be eaten, and your anglers then moan again that they're not catching any fish. And the answer is not to stock fish. The answer is often to get fish out, is to crop them and put them somewhere else. So more fish is not the answer, and I think that's it.
Okay, handsome chap at the end.
Do anybody know what the fish is?
I don't. It must be an easy one if you've managed to get near it.
Now that's the salmon of knowledge.
The salmon of knowledge.
In Belfast, on the banks of the River Lagan. Can you
get a teddy bear? Can you get a stuffed toy?
Next time I go to Belfast, Rob, I will get you a squishy salmon of knowledge.
And when everyone on this call starts asking questions on support, I'll just bring out the salmon of knowledge and just wave it at people. Well, thank you very much for that, Paul. I don't know about everyone else, but I think that was absolutely fascinating presentation. I've seen quite a lot of that before. I might have seen the presentation before, but I always find it absolutely fascinating. And I think as clubs, it always just, it really does tell us that we're only ever scratching the surface. I know there's some fantastic clubs on this call, and the people that do attend these webinars tend to be some of the most forward-thinking clubs in the country that have really been successful. But a lot of us, to be honest, we're only scratching the surface of half of the issues that we've seen in that presentation. So there's always another level and a next step to take, and it's great to have resources such as the IFM to call upon for these things. If anyone's got any questions they can think of, please ask them in the chat or raise your hand. There are a couple in the chat, so I'm going to ask those of you first, Paul, if you're all right for a bit of a Q&A.
Yeah, go for it.
Simon Portal has asked a couple of questions, and to be fair, I'm entirely surprised because it's one that we all face as challenges, and they're based around predation. How detrimental is predation on a fishery, particularly rivers, and how will this change with climate change? And probably in the same mouthful, really, Paul, what impact are otters having generally on the unprotected waters?
I won't get into the otter debate. It's a very difficult one to manage. If predation in river fisheries is an issue, you've got a whole raft of predators, particularly things like cormorants. But if you was to go back to the mid-90s, you remember the Angling Times ran an article that actually got their editor taken to court about cormorants would be the death of fisheries. They put a picture, I think, on the front cover of a silhouette of a person holding two cormorants and a shotgun, and he was taken to court by one of the animal rights lobbies. And it was always seen that was it. You know, once the cormorants got in, that was it. We was never going to catch another fish. The rivers would be devoid of life, and we won't be fishing on rivers in 10 years. But 20 years down the line, or 30 years down the line, and the Trents never fished so well, and that was the fishery was all going to be was all doom and gloom. There's more roach and big fish in the river now than there has been. A lot of rivers are fishing particularly well, despite the predation. But I will say, in some areas where you've got fisheries and you've got rivers that have got little or no protection, where you've got open systems, predation is a real problem. We've got issues up here on the whole headwaters with cormorants. It's a chalk stream. It's crystal clear. We've got very little recruitment of juvenile grayling because we suspect the cormorants are eating them all. We've got a big cormorant roost on a triple SI not far from the river, and so it has to be managed, and it has to be managed to a degree where we've got to do what we can do as fishery managers to make it incredibly difficult for those fish for those birds to hunt. If you've got open swathes of water with no cover, it is a field day for birds. Particularly in the winter when your angler numbers drop off, your bailiffs are maybe walking around middle of the day, the cormorants are on at dawn and dusk, and they have a field day. And I really feel for fisheries that I find it very difficult to manage that situation. But we've got to look at it, and I think the political mood is changing, particularly across Europe with regards to cormorants and cormorant predation. You'll have maybe seen there's been a new paper put to the European Parliament just recently about cormorant predation, looking at sort of managed cormorant control. Yeah, and if you look at some of the other countries in Europe, Denmark particularly has had a real issue with cormorants. They have an even bigger problem because they don't have a lot of vegetation. There's not a lot of trees for cover in Denmark. So their fisheries are very open to it. Holland as well. Some of the Eastern European countries and some of the fish farms have been hammered by cormorants. So it's a very difficult one. But what we've always got to remember here is that we've got to be seen to be level-headed and doing everything in our power to mitigate it, because there is always the bird lobby out there, and we can't be seen as being they still see us as.
We're facing the old angler problem as ever, Paul, and I know me and you face this all the time. We talk about it all the time. And a category of anglers, I won't say anglers, but a category of anglers causes a lot of grief because all they want to do is go straight to the top of the pyramid and shoot them all in the head.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for us to work politically with that. It's very hard to be taken seriously in the right audiences. Piscivorous species, piscivorous birds, cormorants are probably the greatest predation issue in the country, in my eyes. Otters, nowhere even remotely close. Not even remotely close to touching the sides of the damage cormorants do. Otters, and I've experienced this, and I've had halts of 6 otters in locally to me, all in one place. Otters will find a sustainable ecological balance in their area. They can only predate to a certain level. They are territorial. They'll push other otters out of their territory, and one otter can only eat a certain amount of fish. If they get trapped in carp fisheries, different matter, because obviously they'll just sit there and eat all of the prized trophy fish. They'll eat them all and leave the remains. But cormorants, and obviously something, this is something we're tackling quite heavily in my area, Paul, on the East Coast, especially Ferry Meadows. They are wiping out nearly the entire year class.
Yeah.
Year one, as we kind of saw in the presentation, fry recruitment, absolutely insane. It's like fry soup. And once they get to kind of worthwhile cormorant food, we get to year 2, we're talking, 3 inches plus. Survey work, and this isn't just conjecture kind of thing, survey work is proving that the cormorants are eating nearly all of year 2 and 3 class fish, leaving these great big bubbles, the bubble that's waiting to burst when the older brood stock die off. But anglers have got to tackle this in the right way. I think I saw James Rice join tonight. If you're here, James, turn your microphone on and say hello.
Hi everyone.
James is
Sorry,
here.
I can't get my video up. I tried to get it on, but it's not working. But
for anyone that attended our previous webinars, we've been running what we call the National Species Report, which is a report that's available in Clubmate sites that have volunteered to do so, where people can report not just invasive species from a technical point of view, the INS, but piscivorous species of interest and anything that anglers are concerned about. And the overwhelming majority of reports are cormorants, all over the country, spreading further west. James is continuing to work on his study of acoustic deterrence to cormorants feeding. James, I don't know, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. I don't know if you've got any update for us or tell us where you're at the moment. Do you want to give us an idea?
Well, that's really why I come to this meeting, really, just to give you an update. Obviously, thanks for Paul for an amazing lecture. So I've just finished my dissertations and everything. I've just finished my uni course, and I'm going on to my master's. I'm self-funding myself to look at underwater acoustics and startle response in cormorants, just to start with. I have first of all got to do a fish study to see whether these acoustic pingers will affect fish, because obviously we don't want to be causing a problem to our fish when we want to cause it to something else. I've already theoretically, we know the ranges for some fish species, and we know the ranges for the cormorants already. It's just putting it into practice. And if this works, it could be, well, 99% of all cormorant predation won't happen. They'll go down, they'll have this startle response, and they'll fly off. So I'm going through some legal issues at the minute. I'm at the end of those legal issues with intellectual property rights and everything. I don't know if I'm actually meant to be saying this, but it doesn't matter. You're all pretty good. And once I get past this, I'm going to be starting in October my fish study, and then hopefully I'll be coming to Rob at some point with a couple of dates or something like that, and we'll be working forward for the master's side of things. And if the data is really good, we can move forward into a PhD, hopefully, and we can actually streamline a device that can be used and can be bought by every fishery in not the UK, but Europe as well. I think it'd be really, really good.
It's fascinating work that we're happy to continue supporting. Lots of clubmate clubs have got the reporting feature in their app to report invasive species, and it allows all of your anglers, every single one of them, to just use their member area, go report a species, and they can report otters, cormorants, invasive plants, piscivorous species of interest. It's a great way to get anglers in touch with these things because, again, I've had conversations with Paul before. Anglers are not going to go to the Native Species Secretariat and report this. Anglers don't go sideways to another website and find a reporting feature. You need to put it right in front of them. As Paul said, anglers can be a challenge. Your general members, a category of anglers, have got a very selfish mindset. They will moan from their keyboard, they will post it on Facebook, they will do everything other than take the necessary steps to evidence problems and to solve problems. So the Clubmate platform itself does help quite a lot.
I think it's worth saying as well. The common issues on like Ferry Meadows, big open body of water. Yeah, we've got it up here on Hornsey, massive, largest body of water in Yorkshire. Cormorants live in the middle of it. They have absolutely mullered the cyprinid stocks. The roach stocks have gone, and now they just use it as a roost, and then they're flying off around the place. Big bodies of water, really challenging because you cannot put enough structure in that body of water to keep them at bay. And then that you've got, the thing is the same, isn't it? Is it Coombe Abbey Lake in the Midlands in Coventry? Where Jake used to work. Cormorant roost, massive body of water, difficult to manage. Anglers drift off, nobody looks after it. The cormorants have a field day, and then you've lost that recruitment, and then your fish stocks are compromised. But where you can try and manage, if you've got smaller bodies of water and the cormorants coming on, there's things you can do. Jake and Rich at the Angling Trust are great at giving you some ideas, and there's lots of things you can do. Big bodies of water, particularly as Rob says on the East Coast, I'm up the East Coast as well, and we see cormorants, and people report seeing squadrons of cormorants flying over, 20, 30, 40 birds at once. So
we've got 100. We count 100 in situ at one time.
A pound of fish a day doesn't take long, does it?
The maths is quite scary on this, to be honest, and this is why. And it's not to downplay the otter issue. We're all aware of what otters do, but in terms of scale, this is why cormorants are such an issue. When you've got waters like mine with 100 cormorants, and you've got Rutland with 1,000, you talk a pound of fish per bird per day. Start doing the numbers over 1 month, let alone 12 months, let alone 10 years. It's mind-blowingly scary. So we continue to support that. If anyone hasn't got the species report in their Clubmate app, please drop us a line, and we're happy to add it. It's entirely voluntary, so let us know. We've got a question from Julia, I think.
Thank you. Evening, everybody, and thank you, Paul. That was really fascinating. I've learned a lot, and thank you, Rob and Clubmate, for facilitating this. My question is about the impact of carp. How much impact do they have in a lake where you've got silvers, roach, perch, etc., breeding? I have heard, and I don't know if it's correct, that they disturb the fry, the eggs, and it's very detrimental. Is that correct?
It depends how many carp you're talking about, Julia. Fisheries, if you've got a nice balanced ecosystem, and you've got, if you've got difficult unless you know the numbers of fish within your lake and the size of your body of water, but carp at a manageable number will live quite happily with other coarse fish. That's what we used to call them mixed fisheries, didn't we? Where you could go and catch 4 or 5 different species in a day. Carp will come and mop up eggs, as other fish are spawning, but then other fish will do that as well, so as carp in particular, if you see carp spawn, you'll often see other fish coming in behind the carp to pick up the eggs. Carp will eat fry, but again, what sort of numbers? Fish produce, horse fish and in still waters produce lots and lots of eggs because the success rate is really small, and so you have got a large attrition rate. That's why they produce thousands and thousands of eggs. 1% success of eggs. So you are going to see not big numbers coming through. Would carp have a detrimental effect? If there's lots of carp in there, then potentially. Odd ones and twos, then I wouldn't have thought so.
Okay, thank you.
I think I won't say misconception, because it's not a misconception, but I think the mistake is, Paul, that people think they can solve all problems with more carp, which I think is one of the. And I've seen it plenty of times. People think they can solve downturn in angler numbers, downturn in catch rates just by a lot of carp. And when you do tip that balance, as Paul said, it's all about balance. Once you actually tip that balance, carp can very quickly deteriorate a fishery in its kind of wider basis.
Carp have a detrimental effect because of the nature of their feeding strategies a lot of the time. So the bottom feeders, they go along and they just churn at the bottom. They mobilize what we call mobilize the sediment. They put all of that sediment into suspension, which then cuts out the light. And your more sensitive species then have nowhere to spawn because there's no aquatic plants there. It suppresses light penetration, so you don't get any algae, so then you don't get zooplankton. So there's nothing for them other fish to feed on. They get compromised, and then your carp, being the bigger, more robust species, outcompete them when it comes to anglers, baits, and things like that. And they generally do pretty well in crappy, murky, warm, low oxygen water. Everything else gets, it goes backwards, and then you can't. Then are the dominant species, and that's what you tend to see happen.
Thanks very much for that. Any more questions? Has anyone got any other questions they'd like to ask? I've got a couple that I think are quite interesting and hopefully relevant to people here. But has anyone else got any? Feel free to speak up or raise your hand. So one of the questions I'll ask you, Paul, and it's related to when we had Ian Welby on one of our previous webinars talking about invasive species and predation. How impactful to you are signal crayfish and mitten crabs? Because I was very surprised when we talked about our predation. We rolled out a predation survey and tried to gather some data. I was fully expecting overwhelmingly cormorants, just to hear about cormorants, but surprised to hear quite how kind of widespread and kind of how emotive people were about crayfish. So what's your position on those as a national problem at the moment, and where we're at with those species?
Signal crayfish are marauding, I think is the phrase, up the country quite freely now. They're up here, they're in East Yorkshire. We always had a little bit of being out on a limb as we are. We've always been an island away from a lot of invasive species. We've only just got sort of got decent amounts of Himalayan balsam in the past few years. But signal crayfish have a massive impact, particularly in riverine systems. They're burrowing into the banks, they're mobilising sediment, they're covering gravels in sediment, they're eating the eggs as the fish are laid, they're predating on the juveniles. They have a massive impact where you have big numbers of them. It gets to a situation now where we're not even, the management of them is futile because there's so many of them. You can't remove enough to suppress the population, and it's a really worrying situation. Particularly when we have in some of our rivers up here in North Yorkshire, we've still got native white-clawed crayfish hanging on, and we're gradually seeing this steady sort of northwards migration of crayfish into these areas, and we're trying to protect those areas as arc sites as best we can, but it's a very difficult, time consuming and costly battle. Mitten crabs likewise, what issue do they have on fisheries? Short of undermining banks and making it bloody dangerous to stand on the banks in a lot of places because they're so unstable. I think that's one of the major problems you've got with mitten crabs, and also make it very difficult for carp angler, pike anglers and such like to fish dead baits which have ever get picked up by them. So yeah, I suspect crayfish have a bigger impact at the moment than mitten crabs, but yeah, once you've got high densities of mitten crabs, then likewise you're going to see problems, particularly from bank stability with them.
And the other thing I'd like to just ask you, Paul, fantastic presentation. I'm assuming it's okay for us to send this out to people.
Oh, absolutely,
After the seminar. For me, we're talking, and the thing I think I really take away myself from these kind of presentations is it's big fishery management. It's quite intimidating and scary, especially for volunteer organisations, most clubs being volunteer organisations. And I know that the IFM, and one of the reasons we've engaged in a partnership is because we share the same goals, and the IFM does, to an extent, struggle to engage with the volunteer angling community. It's difficult to get the right resources across. And for, anglers tend to make the wrong choices, as we discussed a few of those tonight. So we're trying to engage with the club audience, and hopefully we can help you do that. What are the low-hanging fruit here? Now, I know habitat is going to be the word you'll use, but, given the challenges, and I'll expand on the question, twofold question. What are the largest looming problems? So what, if you had to put your hat on it and say, these are the things you need to be concerned about at your clubs and fisheries in the next few years, and what are the easy things clubs can achieve? Because clubs have got a limited time, limited money, limited ability to engage with some of the things we've spoken about tonight. If you had to name the first problems you should address and the first things you should look at doing with your fishery, what would they be?
I would suggest that a lot of angling clubs and associations have got volunteers. They've got good volunteers who can help. One of the things I would suggest is get a handle on water quality, get an understanding of what your water is like. Get yourself, and it's an initial outlay, can be quite expensive. Buy a dissolved oxygen meter. Start to understand what's going on in your waters and track it. Overlay what air temperature, water temperature, oxygen levels. See how it moves through the season so that you can actually be aware. And what I said in my presentation there about making fisheries more resilient. Be prepared for heat waves and droughts and low water and no rain. Think about how you can make your fishery more robust. Habitat, as Rob says, put some plants in. They provide massive amounts of benefits from a water quality point of view, from a shade point of view, from a productivity point of view. They take up nutrients as well. So when you've got these situations like we have now, where your water levels are dropping and your pollutions are becoming more concentrated, they'll neutralize it. So things like that, they're easy for you to do. You can go to split plants you've got in fisheries and spread them around. Think about water quality and think about as well what fish you've got and the densities of fish you've got within your lakes.
I think you started off really well, I think, by just saying most people, and it's not to tar anyone here, but most clubs don't actually really know the data of what they've got, what they should do, what the dissolved oxygen level is. Some clubs that do buy a dissolved oxygen meter is usually because half the fish are usually dead.
It's always after the horse.
One of the ongoing challenges is half the fish died one day, and someone goes, "You really should have bought one of these," and they go, "Yeah, we'll buy one now." And yes, so it works for the future, and you've learned a tough lesson, so to speak. But yeah, absolutely agree with you. The first part is for clubs to be kind of more, more organised, more aware, collect more data. Something obviously I'm going to be talking to your audience about very soon. The benefits of digital technology in gathering this data. Just to give Jake and Richard a bit of a push, you've got two fishery management advisors at the Angling Trust in Richard Bamforth and Jake DeVille. For any of the member clubs here, or for anyone else, give them a call. They're very easy to get hold of, and they will come out and advise you on the things you should be looking at your fishery in terms of habitat challenges, things like that. That's what you pay your bill for. That's what you're paying for your Angling Trust membership for. Richard and Jake are essentially funded by rod license money. And they will come out to your fishery and advise you on these things. Work really closely with Paul, obviously. So use the resources. Too many fisheries, as I've mentioned, stay quiet until after it's done, till after the problem's occurred, and then look to try and fix it. And habitat, just to cover that, Bob's got a question in a minute. Habitat, I think, has got this kind of bad reputation, Paul, as being kind of, it's the get out clause. It's like a scapegoat. When you speak to the agency, you speak to the Angling Trust, and like even yourself, you know, habitat sounds like you can't shoot anything, you can't remove anything, but please just put a tree in it. It's a very, if you understand like where I'm coming from, it sounds like it sounds like the really cuddly way of addressing problems, because it isn't get rid of any predators, it isn't kind of, but it is so important. And there are some really cost-effective ways of doing it. The one thing I'll point out from,
I think it's management of habitat. Yeah, you think about I could tell you all about put floating islands in here and put floating. It's where you use that planting, or where you use the trees that you might want to put in, and how you use the structures to prevent the cormorants from having a field
feasibility and the cost effectiveness. I was just going to say, those floating islands, we've actually we trialed one actually, with the cormorant predation on Ferry. We trialed it. Cost us nearly £6,000 for a floating island that I can't even see across the lake. It's a tiny pin dot in 100 acres of water. Great to mess around with. We had a play with it. We got one out there. It looks lovely, but it's a complete drop in the ocean. And what we did instead, and there was much more cost effective, and I've actually got some underwater footage of the success of it, was chestnut paling. What we did was marginally surround the marginal reed, because the cormorants were diving into the marginal reed and essentially forcing the fish into the marginal reed and just stabbing them in. So what we did was fenced off underwater our marginal habitat with chestnut fencing, which is essentially pennies. We're talking pennies for hundreds of meters. We were putting in a couple of 100 meters for a couple of grand. And immediately with an underwater camera, there are little fish diving between all this fencing. There's little fish all floating around in the marginal habitats. Been a game changer, and I can do 100 acres for the same price as one floating island. So the cost-effective options to look at. A couple more questions here. We'll go for Bob first, if he can pull himself away from his rig time for this weekend.
Yeah, I'm coaching. Can you get dissolved oxygen issues on rivers? And if you can we do anything about it?
You do see dissolved oxygen issues on rivers, absolutely. Yeah. So you can see that decline, particularly in years like this where you've got really low flows, and the rivers, don't seem to be moving very much. You do, and there's a relationship between dissolved oxygen and temperature, so that as the temperature increases, the amount of available oxygen decreases, it becomes more mobile, it gets gassed off, and you can see it. And the secret to it is in rivers and in lakes is to just get the water moving. So what they'll do is we can put water pumps in, we can throw water in the air, create a splash effect. As it falls, it gathers atmospheric air, it drives it into the water, and then it spreads out that way. And it's exactly the same as, I would come back to what Rob was saying on still waters about being prepared. If you know that the air temperature is going to be 30 degrees for the next week, and your water temperature is going to become 26, 27 degrees, don't be surprised when your oxygen level falls through the floor, and then be running around trying to find yourself a pump to start moving water about. So what I mean about being resilient, making sure you're ready and you can see what's coming down the line. And it's the same with rivers, Bob. We've got to get into our heads that this is the future. We are going to continue to see elevated river temperatures, low river levels, and making sure that we've got that shade and we can get cooler water, and cooler water holds more oxygen. It creates a nicer environment for fish to go.
It's still kind of treated like a news story every year, Paul. Like it's the newest thing that's ever happened.
Yeah.
It's an absolute disaster, and it's a tabloid story. It's going to be the same and worse every single year, other than some random sporadic cooler summer kind of thing, which probably won't happen anyway. But it's going to increase every single year as we move on. And just to throw a spanner in the works from what Paul said earlier about habitat and shade and trees and everything else, the other thing to consider is the reverse of that in areas where you might want to remove trees to increase wind.
You want to get some wind.
One of the easiest and cheapest ways to actually aerate and oxygenate a lake is to allow wind onto it. So there are fisheries that are completely surrounded by trees, which look absolutely stunning. But the problem is they're entirely stagnant because, one, there's no open access to the wind, so there's no turbidity in the water from the wind. And two, especially if they're overhanging the water, Paul, leaf detritus.
That's organic.
Leaf detritus that falls, organic matter that falls into the... So just to throw a spanner in and make sure there are absolutely no easy solutions in here. Sometimes the answer is to take the tree down. But the key is speaking to the right people. The key is people like Paul and others, and the Angling Trust and private fishery management companies. they're qualified to tell you what you should do. Put the trees in, take the trees out. So the key is engaging with the right people.
Yeah, get some wind on it. Wind is free.
Yeah,
Yeah, you get the wind. I know, particularly in this country, we often get good heavy blows even in the summer. If you could start to mobilise and move that water around, it'll do you
but
great.
Don't tell the government the wind's free, because pretty soon it won't be.
Not off the East Coast with all the wind turbines.
Just a quick one there for Bob.
Oh, sorry.
We've got a club very local to us here in the Fens, who every summer have DO problems, and the EA actually bring in water pumps and fit them and run them all summer at their own cost. It's not the club paying for it; it's the EA. So that might be something there. Contact the EA.
Got to have the data first, though, because you don't want to be calling EA when they're all dead.
No, exactly.
Which is usually the case, is that call into the 0800 number because an angler's turned up in the morning and all the fish are dead. You really should get the monitoring equipment. The one thing I'd say is DO isn't probably the largest problem on rivers. As much as Paul, I'm not going to say that it's not an issue, but a river's moving even if it don't look like it's moving. Most of the time there is a level of oxygen in rivers. The River Neen's a very slow moving river near us, and I've spoken to some of the technical officers, and they've said even if it's crawling slower than you can imagine, it creates a lot of oxygen. So I wouldn't say it's the most primary issue on rivers that you should be monitoring in the summer, but having those DO meters, and you can invest in remote operated DO meters now, so you can get an app on your phone that will tell you the kind of DO levels if you've got the money. They're not cheap. We are going to signpost you to a few, actually, because I'm speaking to some partners about some devices that can be signposted to. But it is about spending money, and I know that clubs find it a challenge sometimes. Going back to that committee model where we're all getting voted in, year in. When you're talking about spending £2,000, £5,000, £10,000, they become very big projects, capital B, big projects for a volunteer committee to commit thousands of pounds of members' money. And we are talking thousands of pounds for these devices. But in the long term, take a carp, for example. Most fish are reasonably cheap, but one £30 carp will cost you more when it dies than a DO meter will cost you, which will save every one of your fish. A £30 carp, you're talking a cheap one, £2,500 if you wanted to buy a £30 carp, £3,000 for a fish. David's got his hand up. Go ahead, David.
Well, thanks. Firstly, Rob and Paul, thank you. Very interesting evening. And I can relate to a lot of what's been said tonight at our fishery. That is small fishery, as you know, Rob. We've only got 2 lakes, a couple of miles of river. But it's really a question that I'd like to know for the remaining guests of other fisheries, whether they have the same problems we have with the local council, because we don't own our waters. We pay rent to the council. We do have a fight, especially with the Mole Valley, every time we want to do something. We tried to desilt one of our lakes recently. We put forward a 5-year plan, and they agreed it on paper. But 18 months down the road, they saw what we'd done, and they didn't like it. They were getting feedback from local residents and all sorts of people complaining that we ruined the area. Does anyone else have trouble with councils?
Just to kind of come in, I think Stephen's about to leave, but we'll definitely be sending the recording out to everyone. It's going to be live on YouTube as well, by the way, so you can we'll send the link out to everyone. It'll be on YouTube probably by the weekend. What was the actual not like about it, David? Was there any detail about what they actually didn't like?
Well, there's the issue where we put in we took out the silt. We put in, what's it called? I'm not the fisheries officer. So I don't know. Sticky knicker or knicker? We put it around the banks.
Knicker span.
Yeah, knicker span. That's the word. Sorry.
Yeah.
With knicker span all the way around, and they didn't like that. And we tried to explain why we've done that. We're going to put plants in there, etc., like you've been talking about. And then there was the paths. They said the paths were, unfortunately, a lot of our paths in winter, are unpassable in some places. But then we got the fight with them. Who's responsible for the paths? Is it us or is it the council? What does the boundary become? Our responsibility or the council's responsibility for keeping the paths in good order? All sorts of things, but they're not. Our particular council, unfortunately, our contact is not very proactive. and they do not have an interest apart from when local residents start complaining about what we've done.
The one thing I'll say, and I've actually been dealing with our local council very recently, and we've been quite fortunate, but also being a very, very big club, we've got a reasonable amount of contacts and influence. But there is no one at a council whose name has fish in it. There isn't a single department at your local council that knows, cares, or has any education on fisheries. They only know what the complainants tell them. Most of the time when you meet them in person, they don't even know what you guys are doing. They don't know what the aim of your improvement is. They don't, for the most part, realise you're not eating the fish. And if you have a meaningful conversation, it depends on the council. It's very council to council dependent. But the best thing you can do is beat them to the crack and ask for a meeting and say, we're working on these projects. We've just secured, I think, somewhere in the realms of £30,000 of funding from our council, because they said, well, we got loads of money. We didn't realise you were doing things like this. How would you like some money? And so, yes, very much, says I. Thank you very much. But most of it is a lack of education. And the problem is, David, the people that don't like us get there before us. Because you don't have much reason to speak to the council, so you don't. But the first person they do speak to is Auntie Karen down the road that says, I don't like this, I don't like fishermen, I don't like seeing people on the banks. It is mostly a lack of education, and it shouldn't be. It sounds terrible with councils being a lack of education, but it's because there's no one there whose job it is. Paul, I bet Paul, you've probably dealt with councils a lot.
We had one situation on the Park Lake near us where one of the local dog walkers complained when we put blue dye fix in, because she thought we were going to dye all the swans blue. And the council dragged us straight in.
I tell you what, on the tails of the perils of blue dye, there's a rowing lake next to the river near us, where they put blue dye in every year to keep the weed down in the rowing lake. And one of the local residents on the river thought that looked really handy to get rid of that weed, so he asked them for a bit and chucked it in the river. And you can imagine the river went blue for about a mile, and he got a tap on the shoulder. The EA turned up at his house and said, "You do realise quite how poor we're going to make you in a minute, because you know what the fines are like for doing that, Paul. If you haven't got permission to do it." And to be fair, they scared the bejesus out of him. And in the end, they let him off, because they actually asked us if we wanted to take him to court over it. And we actually said no. I mean, he was completely unaware of what he was doing. It sounded like a great idea. But by God, was he scared. Like, he was terrified when they knocked on the door.
A slug of blue going down the river for a couple of days.
Yeah, we went neon for several days.
The other issues we've got on
they made a point of shooting up.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, David.
I was saying, one of the other issues we've got on the river is, although it's not a long river, we've got the banks eroding, like you've been talking about. But a lot of our rivers go through private farmland, many do. And when you have got obstructions, trees blowing down, gales and what have you, the farmer doesn't want to touch them. He says that's not their responsibility. So you have to wait, there's 17 months for the council when they do come and clear them away.
So, funnily enough, one of your other questions, David, actually was about footpaths and access. Now, it should be, unless you've signed a lease that you really shouldn't have done, it should be the responsibility of the owner of the land or the riparian rights to provide you access to your fishing rights. Now, if you've got fishing rights, they have to give you access, and safe access to those fishing rights.
So if
the footpaths are deteriorated, then it's not your responsibility to fix it, because they should be providing you the access. And if it comes to trees and such, when you're talking about trees floating down the river, if they are in a navigable waterway, report them to the Environment Agency, because they have a statutory duty under flood defence regulations to come and remove obstructions in the waterway. Not so much on the bank. Now, I've got a situation near me where there's a tree falling over. If it's not in the water, they won't really do much with it. If it's just on a footpath, even if it's their own land, they won't do much with it. But as soon as it obstructs so much percentage, and I can't remember, I don't know if you know this, Paul, but there is a percentage restriction on the waterway. So if your river's 10 meters wide and it covers more than 3 meters, it becomes a flood risk that they have a statutory duty to remove.
The same applies if you're putting anything into the stream. You're only allowed to reduce the channel by a percentage of the width.
And there has to be, when the contractors go down, and the EA does pretty much subcontract a lot of work these days. See you later, Babs. When they subcontract the work these days, there is a measurable width that they have to maintain the river. So their contractors will go down, and anywhere that's not enough wide enough to be legally navigable, so to speak. They will mow off the banks, which presents its own challenge, because the contractors, now that a lot of the work is subcontracted to private companies, they aren't too fussed about habitat. So what they'll do is they'll go down the river and stump it. But there is a lot of conversation these days about kind of bringing that back and rewilding again, and talking a lot more about hinging and pinning the trees for habitat rather than just stumping every tree on the river for flood defence purposes.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen pictures, horror stories, Paul, where the contractors have gone down the river and stumped the whole lot.
I've dealt with it through some of the work we have in the Rivers Trust, and that mindset is changing now. But it is something you still see with certain subcontractors, and particularly with some of the drainage boards. They get people in, and they'd rather go down there once and remove the problem.
We're just looking for a nice V. We're looking for the lovely V.
Yep. Instead of having to go out once a year for however long, or twice a year, to prune trees back and branches and stuff, they'd rather just get rid of the problem at the root cause, and that is at the root, and just chop it down. That picture, that video I showed you of the goosander with the perch in his mouth. That's the problem we've got there. It's just been denuded all the way down. It's just a flood channel. I've just signed a contract through my Rivers Trust to work on the bottom end of that, to try and put some habitat back in, and some off-channel habitat for the fish, and additional flood storage. So it can be done. I think a lot of it, particularly, say we are from David with landowners, it's starting that conversation with them, and getting them to see the value of the work that can be done. And obviously, if you've got they're the riparian owner, but you've got rights to access. As Rob said, they have to maintain that access.
You need to start the conversations in the good times, because what Farmer Giles or the council don't want is you to come screaming there's a problem. And it's something I think, and this is where fishery management, and this is something I'm quite passionate about, this is what I'm talking to Paul about. Fishery management doesn't have to involve getting your boots wet. Fishery management is about your relationships with your landowners. It's about being more responsible. It's about building relationships in the good times. Speak to your landowners and say, we're the anglers, this is what we do, these are the benefits we provide, when nothing has gone wrong. Because the first time you turn up to them and you want money or work or access, they're going to not like you very much. But if you provide a benefit for them, there's quite a few of our landowners, for example, where we ask what paths they want mowed, or what access they want, or, is there anything we can do to help? And silly things like litter picking, can we go litter picking for you several times a year? The single biggest problem in angling is that anglers have alienated themselves from the rest of the human race. If we actually start being recognised as valuable members of the community, we will get everything we want. And as Paul well knows, the amount of available funding from rod licence money is tiny. These fishery improvement programme, angling improvement fund, lovely though they are, and I'm not to criticise grant money, it's tiny. But as soon as you start leaping out into the other available pots of funding, if you start talking to people like Sport England or the National Lottery, it's into the hundreds of thousands in grants, and then you can make some serious fishery management difference. Julia, you've got your hand up again. Go ahead.
Sorry, it's Corey. Thanks all. I've got to go, but
cheers, David.
I'll see the recording. Thanks a lot.
Will do.
Cheers, David.
Thank you.
I see you.
Go ahead, Julia.
Thank you. I don't want to take up much time, and I suspect the answer might be a bit complicated. General question. Unfortunately, in my neck of the woods, there is a KVH outbreak at 2 different lakes, a club water, club lake, and I think it's either a syndicate or a private lake. Can you signpost what next for this once, the worst has happened and fish have died in large quantities? Unfortunately, very expensive. It's a case of, shutting the stable door after the horse is bolted kind of thing. But what next for recovery and sort of getting back to, good practice?
So KHV is a virus. So Coiherpes virus. And as you know from viruses in humans, you don't eradicate the virus. The virus runs its course and it's still there. Those of you who've got things like cold sores and things, you've always got the virus. It's there in your body. It's just waiting for an opportune moment to show itself. And that's the same with Coiherpes virus in the fishery. So what will happen is the virus will run its course. A lot of fish will die. Not all the fish. It very rarely eradicates 100% of the population. You'll have some more resilient fish in there that will survive. Will get through the outbreak. The fishery will be I forget what the time frame is for it now, but they can stock fish within a matter of months again if they so wish. So they can put fish back in. It doesn't have to be left fallow anymore. They don't have to close the gates. You know, they have to take precautions, and any sensible fishery manager would. You know, you would stop the fishing and let the fish recover, reduce the stress. They can restock with fish. The problem with koi herpes virus is, as I said, it's a virus. Those fish that have survived are then latent carriers of the virus. And we're starting to see situations now where you're getting second and third outbreaks of KHV several years down the line.
Right.
And that's because unfortunately, a fishery up here, a friend of mine's fishery had it, and he was one of the best. Supplied his own keep nets, supplied his own landing nets, only ever bought fish from one fish supplier, never bought fish from anywhere else. And he got KHV. And when the fish health inspectorate came out and he sort of explained what he did, he said, the fishery inspector said that KHV has probably been there in the fish that were already in here when you bought the fishery.
Right.
And he'd owned it for, I think he's had it probably 6 or 7 years now. And it's just,
you know, this all ties back into the same argument, by the way, because one of the things that will start a KHV is environmental stressors.
Stress.
As the fish become more stressed with environmental factors such as dissolved oxygen, with too much habitat, with too much predation, any increased stress level in the fish will cause dormant koi herpes virus to become live. So all of the factors we've talked about tonight can contribute to KHV. And one of the factors of KHV is, as Paul said, fisheries can very quickly start fishing again. I think it's as little as 2 weeks of clear fishery. Once you've had no new reported cases in 2 weeks, you can allow fishing, and within a certain amount of months can stock. The reputational damage of KHV is what kills fisheries. Because as soon as you're marked as a KHV fishery, they'll say it 10 years down the line. You know, I've seen people down the line and go, oh, you're going to go to so-and-so lake, and they go, oh, no, it's got KHV. And it's not seen KHV for 10 years. And let's not remember, KHV is just one virus that affects one species in one type of venue. But it is the flagship one. It's, you know, it's the famous tabloid disease. But one of the biggest and best things you can do when KHV is over and done with are most of the things we've talked about tonight. Because if you can improve the water quality and the biodiversity and the biosecurity and all of those factors here, you'll avoid repeat outbreaks and perhaps avoid any outbreak you might have. As Paul said, you've probably already got it. If you've never had KHV, your fishery's probably got it, as with many other diseases, Paul, in fish.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And like I say, people, you know, when you start looking for them, you often find them. You know, parasites being a key one. You know, you've had Ian on there, haven't you? I mean, Ian's a top parasitologist. He'll tell you if you go and look on a fish, you'll find no end of parasites swimming around, and they're often there just in the background. You know, just minding their own business. It isn't until you have that stressful incident where the fish's immune system is compromised. Those parasites that are there go, oh, this is a nice environment. Now it's not there. The immune system's not fighting back. And off they go. And it's the same with things like KHV. Yeah, it's often those waters that have pushed the limits of the number of fish they can stock, the amount of angler pressure they give it. You know, there might be 4 or 5 matches a day, and they're stocked to 800, 900, £1,000 an acre, and those fish are constantly under pressure. It becomes warm, and boom, all of a sudden it shows itself. And one of the other things I should have about when I talked earlier about climate change and making your fisheries resilient, koi herpes virus is a temperature dependent virus. And with climate change, we're going to see warmer springs and warmer autumns. And as a result, koi herpes virus is going to be viable for a much longer window. Yeah. So the likelihood of it, you didn't used to see it before May and it had been gone by September. Now we see it in April and it's still here in October. So you've got to be ready for much longer. And yeah, and the numbers of fisheries will lose all the fish. There's 2 things. There's a number of fisheries where they lose a lot of fish and then they go, it's never fished so well. And you go, how does that? You've lost fish. Yes, that's because you was massively overstocked to start with. You've lost 30% of your population, and all of a sudden all the other fish are going, ooh, look at all this space and resources.
The fish are so happy. You know, the fish are not stressed anymore.
Unfortunately, the mates have died. They're in a much better environment.
This will be the same ones I spoke about the other day, Paul, where they go scoop all the dead ones off in the morning.
Yeah.
You know the very, very overstocked commercial fisheries where it is literally someone's job to go scoop dead fish every morning because they've died of stress. But these will be the ones that where half the population dies of KHV, the rest of them go rampant. you know, the rest of the fish will go, this is brilliant. I feel lively as anything. For some reason, I just feel more awake now, you know, and they'll be swimming and feeding like mad. Craig, we'll come to you. We're going on a bit tonight, guys. So we'll go with Craig, and then we'll probably call it a night. Go ahead, Craig.
We have a problem with our lake floods because it's connected to the river. We've got to start doing some work to the banks, else we will probably lose a lot of the area for fishing. What would be a cost-effective measure in sorting the banks out and stopping the erosion?
Without seeing it, Greg, it's quite difficult to give you a solid answer. There are green techniques you can use, and obviously you've got a number of factors at play, haven't you? One, you've got to know where the water's coming in. Can you minimise the water obviously eroding your banks?
Unfortunately, we can't because we're connected to the river. So
it's an on-land lake.
Yeah.
It's an on-land lake, so you've got the flow coming in your lake.
Yeah, we've got a culvert each end, one in, one out.
I would suggest you look at some form. Yeah, you've got two options. You can either go down a hard engineering route, you know, where you bring in gabion baskets and riprap and you try and shore it up with rock and boulder, or you go down a green engineering route where you try and be a little bit more sensitive and a bit softly, and you use things like driven piles and Christmas trees and brushwood and rolled up bundles and faggots behind, and then you try and secure the bank that way. But it depends on what degree of erosion you've got, I think. Yeah, to start with. Yeah, if you're going to start losing banks, you need to start doing maybe the heavier end of it.
Certainly one where you need to get someone with the expertise, and you need to pay for someone with the expertise to come and have a look at it. There are fishery management experts out there. Speak to the Angling Trust first, your fishery management advisors out, but a specialist in fishery management will be able to come out and tell you exactly what you should do. It also obviously depends on your landowners, because your landowners will like the hard or the green solution better, and some will be willing to do one and not the other.
Well, we've actually spoken to the town council, and they didn't actually realise how bad the issues were with bank erosion, tree roots coming up, trees overgrowing the lake, everything like that. So they're actually willing to try and help with the situation as well.
Is it an on-land lake in as much as there's constant water flow? It doesn't come under any water storage under the Reservoir Act or anything like that, does it?
I don't think so, no. We're just basically, it was where they built the A45 years ago. They used the clay from there to build the road.
It's what we call up here a borrow pit. So they took the clay out of it to build the road. We've got them all the way along the River Hull here. But they borrowed the clay to build the flood banks. But yours is still online.
What I'll do, Craig, is we'll have a chat. I've got a few contacts. We'll come out and say hello.
Yeah, no problem. Because obviously, you know the issues we've got at the moment. Because I spoke to Barbara, didn't I, the other day? So
we'll let you get your immediate issues out of the way. We'll have a chat about it.
Yeah.
We'll call it a night for tonight, really, guys. I think it's been an absolutely fascinating presentation by Paul. I could listen to the chat forever. Going to be working long term with the IFM on fishery management and providing you guys with resources. There's a couple of benefits of our partnership, just to let everyone know. All Clubmate customers are going to be able to access a discount 20% off the IFM full certificate course in fishery management. I'm not going to just spend my life selling this for Paul, but basically I think that at Clubs That Care, you should look for someone who's passionate, who really wants to improve their skills, and you should have a qualified fishery management expert. So if anyone can take that course, I think it'd be really beneficial to have at least one at a club that takes this course. Paul, I'll just give you 1 minute to kind of give us an overview of the course and kind of sell yourself to the audience. But for me, it's something that not just for the fisheries, but developing people that are passionate about fishery management. It's a great first step. Yeah,
so we've been running the IFM certificate course now for 30-something years, so it's quite well known and respected in the industry. It's a modular course. It's done by distance learning. There are 8 modules now, and you choose 6 of the 8. We'll send you the materials for all 8, so you'd have to pick there and then. But there's everything from sort of water quality to fish biology, fish health. There's a fishery management unit. There's an angling unit on there. There's a fisheries law and legislation unit as well. So we teach how to use the law to manage fisheries. It's all done by distance learning, but you've got a dedicated course manager. It is assessed. We have an exam in January and June each year. It's open book, and we give you a certificate of achievement. As I say, loads of people who are quite high up and have been in the game for a long time have taken that course. And with the discount, so it takes it down from 400 quid to 320 quid. You know, so it's a decent chunk off. And again, if you say for somebody in your angling club, you know, who wants to get more involved, it's something they should certainly do. And we send you loads of resources with it as well. We have a certificate field course weekend each year, so we try and get everybody together. We do online seminars and things. So yeah, it's certainly something to think about.
So as clubs professionalise, they should probably all have a fishery manager. So, you know, even your volunteer angling clubs, I know it's not one of the traditional positions like chairman, secretary, membership secretary. You should have a head of fisheries or a fishery manager. And your fishery manager would well benefit from doing a course such as this. We will be sending out further details. It is in the blog post that we put out about IFM last week, but we'll keep kind of pushing that out to the audience. I'll just repeat, thank you very much, Paul. It's been absolutely fantastic, and we'll look forward to the next one soon, and we look forward to seeing you all again on the next webinar. So thank you very much, everyone.
Cheers, guys. Nice to see you all.
Good night, folks.
Yeah,
Cheers. Bye-bye.
good night.
Bye.